Welcome to CameraShake Podcast, episode 130, the podcast where we talk about photography, videography, and anything that's got anything to do with any of that. That being said, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, be reminded that there's a fully fledged, fully technicolored version over on YouTube, if you're so inclined. Anyway, in today's episode, we have another awesome guest. It is the creative director, photographer, retoucher, compositor, artificial intelligence expert, father to a cat called Miss Scraggles, and Krispy Kreme aficionado. Give it up for MICAH Burke. MICAH, man, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Awesome. So we've just discovered that actually you're in an area of California that I know reasonably well.
Yeah, I actually live in Central Valley in a place called Stockton, but I work and do a lot of commuting into a place called Livermore, which is a beautiful little valley with wineries and upscale food restaurants and that sort of thing. So, but I do a lot of my photography between Livermore and the Central Valley. There's this little stretch of road which is just gorgeous, and I can get 100 different angles of the same sunset, and it's pretty awesome up there.
Yeah, I've been admiring your landscape photography, which is fantastic. It has like a fantasy feel to it almost.
Yeah, several years ago I took a class through Trey Radcliffe had a system set up where you could interview and work with mentors, and I was working with a photographer named Karen Hutton, and sort of developed sort of this fantasy style that she really liked and sort of adopted. And I don't have a lot of time to work on it anymore because I've got so much other things going on with AI and Adobe Max and that sort of stuff. But when I do my photography, I kind of like to add a little bit of art to it. I'm not a journalistic photographer in any way, shape, or form. I like to play with my photos a lot, and I don't have any problem with anybody doing that.
Yeah, it's this thing. I think because there's this sort of old school of thinking of like you got to get it right in camera, and I say this all the time on this podcast, and when I do talks, for instance, I try to bring that across. Is that it's a little bit like a guitar and an amplifier, an electric guitar and amplifier. Like the one thing on its own doesn't make a lot of sense, but once you put them together, that's where the power lies.
Indeed.
And I think post-production is one of these things where you can really not only bring a photo to life, but really change the meaning of it and really become artistic and enhance the whole thing incredibly, which is of course a real skill.
Yeah, it takes time to learn, and like anything, it takes time to practice, and practice makes it get better every time you do it. Getting things right in camera is important, especially if you're looking for sharpness and you're looking for clarity. Those things are real important to nail in the camera. And then when you get it home, then you can kind of decide, hey, this is a great photo, but it would be really cool if there was a giant moon behind it. And then you go and do that.
Exactly. And, very often, I mean, more often than not, I find that, it's what I usually say is, I have to get it right in camera too. I have to get it right for the edit because I already know what the post-production steps are going to be. I need to make sure I get what I need for the editing. I need to get that right in camera. So I also need to get it right in camera. It's just in a slightly different way, I suppose.
Yeah, indeed.
It's a real skill. But of course, what we're going to talk about today is where, the robot overlords are taking over, and artificial intelligence has been coming into the game massively over the last, I would say, probably, I don't know, maybe over the last year, but it seems like over the last 6 months, it's really kind of skyrocketed. I'm just thinking about, the AI that most people will probably know from the latest Photoshop and Lightroom updates. I mean, obviously, things like content aware fill has been around for a while, but I think most recently, it's like Photoshop has really kicked it out of the ballpark as far as its ability of artificially creating aspects of the image is concerned. How did you first get into the whole artificial intelligence thing?
Yeah, so there's a little story behind that, and that's back in 2020 when the pandemic hit. Sort of stuck at home, not able to take photographs in my favorite places, and so I was flying my drone quite a bit and taking pictures with my drone. there's only so much you can do with that in the States before people threaten you. So I started playing with an app called Wombo Dream, and Wombo Dream made these amazing full color, colorful images that I can probably throw up here, and I'll show you what you're looking at here. I'll start. So these are some of my photos from the past years that I've taken, some of my landscapes. Kind of give you an idea how I kind of want to draw some fantasy in there. But as I was saying, so in 2020 and early 2021, there wasn't a whole lot of photography I was able to do. So I got this app called Wombo Dream and started playing with these prompts. And these are text prompts. And so you're typing things in. In this case, I was typing in rainbow, dancing, dervish, sari, or some other, ethnic clothing, and was coming up with these amazing, very stylistic images, which I thought, hey, these are pretty cool. You can do stuff with this. I could see taking this and maybe into Illustrator and recreating them, or taking them into Photoshop and playing with them. But as time progressed, I noticed that there was different ways you could manipulate the app to do different things. So then I think in 2021, the Wombo Dream was creating these really neat stylistic images of people and of artistic and architecture, but it wasn't really doing anything like photographic. And I was really looking for something a little stronger, a little more photographic, a little more up my alley, so to speak, as far as it goes. And I found this program called Canvas by NVIDIA. And Canvas runs on Windows, but there's also a web app called Galgan 2. And if you go and you search Galgan 2, you'll find the app. And it works just by painting on the screen, and you tell it what you're painting. For example, in this case here, I'm painting, this sort of a field in front of an ocean, and there's a road running down the middle of the field. And I'm trying to recreate some images I saw when I visited Ireland a few years ago. And I really wanted to kind of recreate sort of that feeling, the Irish coastline. And sure enough, it does a really good job. And it's producing them at about 1024 by 1024. And they're fairly photographic looking, and you can upscale them with, say, Topaz or whatever, and they come out looking really good.
So what we're talking about here is really sort of the next step from, let's say, like content-aware fill or object selection in Photoshop, where obviously the software or the algorithm figures out, well, there's an object, and this is the main subject of the image, and this is what we're going to select, for example. Here we're really artificially creating an image from scratch by telling the app or the algorithm, by using words, what it is that we want to see in the image.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is what's called, in these cases, this is what's called in the parlance of artificial intelligence, this is called text to image. Uh-huh. And so you're literally typing in text that you want to see. In the example of the second image here on the screen, it's a doorway to another realm in a field of flowers, and this is what it created. And one of the cool things about the text-to-image generators is that you can use entire sentences. You can add details about what you want to see. I want it to be a door covered in ruins, or I want it to be a photograph by a certain photographer, or a painting by a certain painter. You can come up with all sorts of wild and neat creations this way. The Will Smith image there, I literally just typed in Will Smith Slack into Mid-Journey, and that's what it produced. Now, this was still early 2022, sorry. After that, there's a sort of a massive evolution, just as you noticed, in just the past year, an explosion has occurred. And what's happened is that companies like Mid-Journey and Stable Diffusion, Stability AI, and the company who makes DALL-E 2, which is OpenAI, they've added a lot of detail and information into their platforms, adding more and more and more tagged images to produce even more realistic images. So back in about September of 2022, both Mid-Journey and Stable Diffusion released new updates, which, rather than creating these kind of cool artistic images, which you might want to play with, actually started creating photorealistic images out of the box.
And that's the
So
thing. I think that was the thing that blew our mind, like a couple of months ago when when Dali was big in the news. And I remember seeing some of the photorealistic results, and that just completely blew my mind at the time.
yeah, these four results here that I'm showing, these were all right out of Midjourney. These were very simple prompts. Did a whole series of little action figures, and you can see it looks like a three-dimensional object, and it's got depth of field. And again, you tell the AI what you want to see, and it will produce it. And I was starting to composite images together. At the time, I had been asked by Russell Brown, who's the creative director at Adobe, to make some movie posters for an upcoming presentation he was going to do at the Adobe Max class. And so I was looking for pictures of stars like Keanu Reeves and these other people dressed as Vikings. And you can literally type in someone's name, like Benedict Cumberbatch, and as a Viking, and you'll actually get him dressed as a Viking. It's pretty insane what you can do with it now.
That's incredible. I mean, I saw your series of photos of like a late night show hosts as like action figures.
Yeah, I did a whole series. I called it Real Heroes. I did little kids as action figures, and then I did a series of sort of late night talk show hosts as action figures because I had seen, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel was mentioning that somebody was using his image as a prompt in Midjourney or in Dolly, and they were coming up with some interesting stuff, but it wasn't that great. And so I'm like, no, you could do anything with this. But I think most people know that we're using AI more and more in almost everyday activities, especially within photography and Photoshop. For example, the new content-aware object selection in Photoshop, that's using AI to determine sort of the boundaries of things. And then there's applications like Topaz Gigapixel, which are actually able to take an image that's low resolution and blow it up using artificial intelligence.
And Topaz sharpening as well, in fact.
Yeah, Topaz sharpening AI is pretty slick. I love the motion blur cleanup because just when you thought you got that shot and you get it home and you're looking at it, you're going, well, I missed the focus. You can bring it back pretty good.
That saved a project of mine recently where one of the critical shots that the client wanted, I looked at it on the screen and I'm like, oh, damn it. It's soft. It's so soft. I can't deliver that. And then I went like, wait a minute. Topaz sharpening. Let's just give that a shot. And I kid you not. I mean, it took 3 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what you can do with it. Yeah, I definitely agree that it's amazing. I think, and just sort of give everybody sort of an overview of what we're talking about, because we're going to start talking about how it kind of corresponds with Photoshop and that sort of thing pretty quick. Just to kind of give you an idea, most of these are using what's called a generative adversarial network. And it's a pretty straightforward process where you take the idea, like a cat. You take a bunch of images of cats and you just pound these into a database along with sort of tagged information of what you're seeing, what kind of cat it is, what sort of the position it's in, etc. All of that information gets tagged together into the database. It's then you take two separate versions of the database and you let them fight it out over one's a cat. And the one that wins goes on to continue this sort of process of elimination until you get a better and a better and a better model. And that's sort of what Galgan and Canvas use. And it works real well for landscape images and sort of general images. It's not real good on people and that sort of thing. Dolly 2 is using something called Clip, which sort of the same system. Lots of images of critters, lots of images of skateboards. We're going to throw those all into the database. And it's going to go and generate, based on that data, what your new image is. For example, you want a cat on a skateboard. Well, you don't necessarily have to put a picture of a cat on a skateboard into the database. You just have to put a cat and skateboards. And it knows how to position the cat. It knows how to do all of this. And it will create the cat on the skateboard for you. And it's sort of mind-blowing when you can type in, anything and get some good results. So that's sort of the way how it works. Let's see if I've got anything. I should show you this last slide here because it's kind of important. So the new method, those are sort of older generative methods. The newest method is what's called diffusion, and that's where we get stable diffusion. And this is where you hear the word diffusion. And what this literally means is, and we've all done this, we've all played with this as photographers, at least those of us in Photoshop, take an image and then turn it into just complete noise, right? Just continue to add noise and add noise and add noise to that image until it's obliterated. Well, in this case, what happens is the computer will do this, and then it learns to back that image up from the noise back to the original image by adding detail, adding detail, adding detail. And it can generate a brand new cat from other images of cats. So this cat never existed. This cat does not exist. This is no one's pet. This pet, it's, there's some websites out there, this beach does not exist, or this person does not exist. Well, this cat does not exist. It's a completely generated creature. And it's based on this diffusion method. So that's how Midjourney and Stable Diffusion kind of work together. So that's kind of the basics of AI imaging and how it works. We could probably talk some more about other aspects here.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, you mentioned that a lot of those algorithms or AIs really base their methods on a vast array of imagery, like millions or even billions of different images that are being tagged, and it analyzes those. Where does it get those images from?
So, as a lot of people may have noticed, sometimes if you're using this one of these AI generators and you type in an image, you'll actually get an image and you'll actually see watermarks sort of faded into the image. And so it tells you that it's pulling them from the internet. And it's pulling these images and the information tagged a lot of times directly from the internet. And there's an options here, but just for general, most of them are you pulling them directly from the internet or from a sort of a collated database of images that are tagged and ready to go. It definitely has in the past slanted towards royalty-free images on the internet that had watermarks and stuff, and you could always pull them up with watermarks. But kind of to give some clarity, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, rather than if you and I wanted to composite an image together, we would take different images from different people and we would cobble those images together in Photoshop. And the original photographer might be able to go back and go, hey, that's my cat, or that's my bicycle, and you've just composited it into your image. Well, these are not really doing that. And it's a clarification I think that's important, because there's some artists and there's some photographers out there who feel like the work's being sort of stolen for these projects. And to some extent it is, but it's as if, and there's a lot of caveats here, but it's as if I was to buy all of the photos in the world and place them on my wall, decide which ones I wanted to simulate, and then create my own image based on those. So you're not really copying the image or the styles per se. So it's not like there's elements of the image, your image in this image. It's a completely new and original image, utilizing the style that that you've asked it to do. So it's a quandary, but and there's definitely ethical issues here. But just sort of cut off the copyright issue right there. I'm not talking about copying someone's property.
I think you could probably liken it to if you went to an art gallery and you studied all the great painters of the past, and then you take that knowledge, you've been looking at all of those images and all those pictures and paintings, and then you go and you create an image in the style of Dali, let's say, for argument's sake. I think that's probably a similar thing, because you haven't stolen anything, or you haven't nicked anybody. You haven't stolen Dali's painting, but you just recreated something in that style. I can imagine that stock photography in the future will be more of a thing where you literally just artificially generate the image that you're looking for. Like, let's say if it's like, I don't know, sunrise over the Buckinghamshire countryside with mist on a winter morning or something like that.
Yep. That's how this sort of developed for me in doing posters and images for the Adobe Max class for Russell Brown. I was wanting very specific images. I wanted a sort of Norwegian fort, the snow on the top with sort of water, at a certain level. And I was having a real hard time going through Adobe Stock looking for those images, and I didn't find what I was looking for. So on a whim, I decided to go into Midjourney, just type in the prompt, and I started getting amazing images right out of the box. And I'm like, this is perfect. I'm ready to go. I just needed to upscale them a bit and then throw them into the posters. And so I provided all of those images to the people who attended the class to use in their own images. And so we created all of these movie posters using those images, and it turned out pretty good. I also did create a whole series of Hollywood stars dressed as Vikings, and then composited them together as well.
Awesome. Wicked. I've got to tell.
I always thought that Bryan Cranston would look great as a Viking king with a big horn helmet.
Awesome. They should reshoot all of Breaking Bad just like that.
I'm all for it, man.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Breaking Bad in 800 AD. Love it.
Breaking really bad.
Yeah, breaking really bad. Oh man, I've got to talk to Dave Williams about this, because he's he's embarking on a trip to the Arctic to mainly take photographs. All of that might be unnecessary in the future. You can just generate them.
Yeah, who wants to freeze themselves to death? Just generate them and say, I went to the Arctic, and here they are, right?
Exactly.
You can even add a polar bear here or a penguin over there, depending on which side you're on. Yeah.
Yeah, and he can copy himself in. It's just as proof that he was there.
Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty amazing things you could do with this. So yeah, I definitely think that would be useful. It was good seeing Dave at the Adobe Max and getting to know him and work with him on the projects.
Yeah,
he makes a pretty compelling Viking too. So all dressed up. I've got pictures of him in full makeup and gear, all ready to go.
Yeah. I saw some of that online. I have to say, I like the haircut. Specifically, I saw him just after he got back from Adobe Max, and he still had the hair. So,
yep, yeah, he looked pretty good. So it was good seeing everybody there, and it was a great springboard. He was able to produce a lot of different things. So let's see if I might be able to bring up one of the posters here from the Adobe Max class and kind of give everybody an idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, so the whole project was really based around Vikings, the saga of the swords.
Yeah, so every year we do a different, sort of a different theme. We did a Japanese theme, we did a manga anime theme, we did sort of kaiju with giant monsters, we did Hollywood monsters one year. So this year we wanted to kind of go with something that wasn't too ethnic in some way and go with Vikings. The last time I went, we did Aztecs and Egyptians, and they really meshed real well, sort of a Day of the Dead. Unfortunately, some people weren't overly thrilled with that, but I really enjoyed that. I thought it worked real well together. But this year we decided to go with Vikings, and here's a composite image I did with the Vikings. Russell Brown there in the center. But just so everybody knows, everything except the people in this image is AI generated. The background, the waves, the rocks, all of that is generated with AI and then composited into this image. And it worked really good. And I've got this poster hanging on my wall, and it's a huge, 40 by 30 image. It's a very large poster.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like AI really is the future when it comes to compositing. In general, I think.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of advancement. And in talking with the Adobe engineers this year at Adobe Max, and I have to be careful how much I say because I think some of them is still under NDA, but they're taking a very slow, measured approach. And they did mention during the Adobe Max keynotes that they were taking a very slow approach to this, considering the ethical issues that were involved. One of the things that they were talking about is they were concerned that they wanted to make sure people could tell what was a real image and what was generated. And I see this as an issue coming up, as you know, here in the U.S. and probably just about everywhere. There's sort of an issue with fake news going on, and I was playing with Midjourney the other day, and you can generate very realistic images, say from the 1970s, of things happening that didn't happen. And so one of my concerns is that I follow some folks online who sort of debunk UFO experiences, and I'm always interested on how people are. Uh, they see an image, and as soon as they see the image, their brain creates a whole story around the image and adopts that story as being, the truth. Well, and we've seen this especially in the political cycles in the U.S. We'll get a 20-second clip of an event, and we're all basing everything upon that 20-second clip. And that very 20-second clip is a very narrow view of what happened. We don't see what's going on over here. We don't see what's going on over here. We only see what happened here for those 20 seconds. So it's easy to say in those 20 seconds that this was a bad thing or this was not a good thing that happened. But once you get the full scope, you might see, this is not necessarily what happened. But going back to the UFO things, we'll see a picture of somebody recently. There was a person who was shooting a video through an airplane window, and there's an object that moves across the screen very quickly. And everybody's like, oh, this is a UFO. It's clearly a super fast UFO. Well, what you don't know is that the image was a time-lapse image, that it's probably got night vision on there, or it's a long exposure, and so everything's streaking across the image. And once you slow this image down, you go, that's just another plane about 1,000 feet away moving in in the opposite direction. So it looks like it's moving extremely fast. Well, in the same way, I think with AI, we're going to be able to generate things that never happened. You can create very realistic images with AI, and I'm concerned that, one of the other ethical issues is that we'll be able to generate fake history that will influence people.
Yeah, and there is a moral side to this, and of course, that's a discussion that's been sort of going on in photo retouching for quite some time. When we're talking about, for instance, elongated necks and, changed body proportions and, elongated legs and all the rest of it. And the way that affects children and teenagers in the way that they, think of their own bodies, for example. That's been a discussion that's been going on for a good few years. And I think, and anybody who's listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the EU has actually passed a law that, or at least certain countries in the EU or something have passed a law that basically means that if a company uses those kind of advertising images, they need to clearly, to basically make it clear that this has been a photoshopped image. Essentially, that's what it is. But I tell you what, before we go into that, I forgot one thing, because one thing that we like to do on this show is we like to shout out. We like to give some listeners a shout out. So this week's listener I want to give a shout out to is Britt O'Neill. She sent me a really nice message on Instagram, I believe. She's a portrait, wildlife, and landscape photographer in Ireland, and had a look at your images, Britt. They're freaking fantastic. I'm going to put your Instagram handle in the description of this video. People check that out. Britt O'Neill, fantastic wildlife images there. Anyway, Britt, thanks for listening. Again, if you're listening out there, or if you're watching this video and you want to get in touch, you can do that on Instagram. It's at CameraShake Podcast. We're also on Twitter, although who knows how long for, because we don't know what's happening with Twitter. It's at Shake Camera. You can also hit us up in our Facebook group. If you check out facebook.com/group CameraShake Podcast, that's really where we have a little community going. So, hit us up there. Anyway, Britt, well done. Cool. Yes. So, where were we? Photoshop retouching again. That's been a discussion that's been going on for some time. I can see how AI is going to take that to a whole different level.
Indeed, yes. I definitely think there's going to be a lot of changes. And like I said, I was talking with the Adobe team. I did see some of their upcoming plans, and they are going to be eventually integrating sort of generative imagery in their system soon. There's already some with the neural filters, although it's still fairly limited. I played with if you download the beta, they have a background generator, which is generative, although I thought it was extremely limited, but it is sort of a peek into what's going to happen.
Yes,
if people want, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, the neural filters, I was going to say, I find them quite fascinating. They have also improved over the last year or so quite dramatically. In fact, I did did a job the other day where I was reconstructing a black and white photo that was very heavily damaged. And it was, the client had a photo of their, I believe it was their grandparent or something, which was like a World War II photograph, black and white photograph. And I basically cleaned it up, and then I gave them a colorized version of it, which actually was, I have to say, the result was phenomenal. I mean, it literally made it just made that person come alive on that old black and white photo. And I think they were really very, very impressed and taken aback as to how realistic that looked. And I remember using...
Yeah, it's...
Sorry, I just say, I remember using that particular neurofilter like about a year ago, and the results weren't by any stretch of the imagination anywhere near where they are now.
Yeah, there's also in the newest version of Photoshop, there's the photo restore, which is pretty good as far as
Yes.
fixing faces and taking scratches and dust out of an image. I think it's a little aggressive on how it does it, and it's really aggressive on the face, and it's less aggressive on the rest of the image. I think as time gets better, as time goes by, it's going to get better and better. And I think it's going to be really useful. Yeah, it's interesting though. If folks are interested in getting sort of generative technology in Photoshop now, there are a couple of options already available. Apart from Adobe, for example, there's the Stable Diffusion plugin by Christian Cantrell. It's a free plugin. You do have to have an account with Stability AI and with DALL-E 2 to use this if you're interested. There's also another plugin by a company called Flying Dog, and it's actually pretty good. They're both actually really good for what they're doing. There's still some hiccups. This is all still sort of cutting edge stuff, so it's kind of fun to use, and I can demonstrate those at some point. But if anybody wants to sort of jump into this, you can go right to DALL-E's website, which is, I think it's openai.com, or to Stability AI's website, and just start playing with it and learning how this works. And think about all the things that you would put into an image, whether it's, the lens size you're using, the aperture that you're going to be using, the color grading you want to put into the image, whether you want a cool tone or a warm tone. And then everything you want about the image. Do you want it just to be a journalistic style, or do you want it to be an epic photo with cinematic lighting? You can add those terms all into your text prompt, and you'll come up with some amazing imagery. Mid-Journey, which is one of the generative products, runs through an application called Discord, which maybe folks know, but Discord is it's sort of a chat application. And it allows you to interact directly with the Mid-Journey system through this chat application. And as you can see, I've been playing with it a little bit here today. This is a fantastic example. So I'm going to tell the bot to imagine. And let's go, I like kind of the Dutch angle. It doesn't really get the Dutch angle there, did it? But we'll just go, let's try an epic photo of I'm stuck on Viking, sorry, Norwegian. Someone's going to tell me I'm spelling things wrong. Fjord with snow-capped mountains. We'll go cinematic lighting. We'll go 16 millimeter, 44 megapixel. Now, that doesn't mean it's actually going to make the image 44 megapixel, but it's just going to add extra detail. And detail helps if you spell correctly. And there are other things I can do to this prompt to get certain aspect ratios and that sort of thing, but right now I'm just going to let it run. So Mid-Journey just upgraded to what's called version 4, and version 4 is a new model incorporating billions of images, and so it's got a very strong image base that is pulling from, and the images are quite photographic generally. Now, I could have said painting instead of photo, and what would have happened is I would have gotten a painting, a more painted look. You can even use a specific artist's name as a reference to get a specific style if you're interested. So as you can see, this is our first step. This is the first step in creating the image. You can see it's a very blurry. And again, remember, it's taking a blurry, noise-filled image, and it's going to be ever increasing the steps of which it's going to be generating that image. So now it's gotten even better. and even better. And then once it's done, we'll be able to take one of these images and blow it up, or all four of them if we want. Here's our finished product. And these are pretty spectacular. So I actually I like them all. Well, I'll use this one in the bottom right here. So I'm going to upscale, which is what I'm doing here with this button U4. That's going to upscale this number 4. And so once it's upscaling it, it's going to upscale it from the small, like 512 by 512. It's going to upscale it to about 1024, but actually I think it's 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels. I can then easily save this, drag it into Photoshop, and go from there.
So for those of you listening to the audio version of this, I highly recommend you hop over to YouTube where you can actually see what's going on here, because it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch it generate the images. And with some of these, you can actually save sort of a movie. You can tell it to save a movie of the generation process, and you can actually see where it came from. Now, with all of these generative methods, for example, Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or DALL-E, there is something called a seed number. And that seed number is sort of the numerical equivalent of what that image is. And you can use that number to generate variations of that image over and over again. But here's my final image from Midjourney. I'm going to go ahead and open it up and save a copy of it. I'm going to save it to my downloads. We'll just go drag that thing into, let me get out of this. This is another image I was working on earlier today. Let's go grab that image.
So what we're looking at here is basically an artificially created image of a Norwegian fjord with snow-capped mountains and a dramatic sky, which, for all intents and purposes, I mean, it really doesn't exist. That's the first thing to say, is right? That's not a place on the planet, actually. It's just
correct. Yeah.
It's a creative. I mean, it's a bit like a painting, I guess. I mean, it's a photorealistic interpretation of reality.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I've got certain settings on my Midjourney right now that's making a little bit of a painterly look to it. You can kind of change that so it's a little less painterly and more realistic image. We can even tell it to redo the same image in a different format. We can even go back and tell it to use that same image and do it at a specific artist style. So once you have that image, what does it say it's called? You're still looking at, sorry. Looks like you're still looking at, I don't know what it's called. There we go. So we're going to switch over to Photoshop, and you can see I've opened the image in Photoshop now. And now I can even go in here in Photoshop and I can just start compositing it. And if we look and see what the size is, you can see it's a 1024 by 1024 this image. So I brought the image into Photoshop, and you can see we can go and see what the image size is. Right now it's 1024 by 1024. As time progresses, this is going to get better and better. And of course, there's nothing keeping me from taking this and its gigapixel and blowing it up even bigger. It'll still look really, really good. So that's Midjourney, and that's sort of the Midjourney process. Is you go into Discord, you type in the prompt, you get the image out. With Stable Diffusion and DALL-E, it's similar if you're going to use the web. And maybe we should take a step back and kind of describe that process. There's different ways for the user to access these different products. All of them, stability. So Stable Diffusion and DALL-E both have web apps that you can access. Let's see if I can share the web for this.
So it essentially means you go onto the website and all the computation takes place in the cloud, essentially.
Correct. So with DALL-E, if you go to labs.openai.com, and you can type your prompt right here into this box, and it'll create whatever that image is. For Stable Diffusion, I think it's Stability AI. There's several different ones. But yeah, I find as far as quality goes, I find Midjourney produces right now still some of the best output. And then Stable Diffusion is just on the heels of that. And then DALL-E for direct image output, I find is sort of behind the pack at this point. DALL-E has a lot going for it. One of the coolest things with DALL-E is the ability to take an image that's already existing and add to it. We can take our Epic Ford here, And you're seeing my screen okay? So we can go ahead and just add on to this epic forward here. So we'll just go epic photo of a Norwegian fjord. And we can tell it to generate, and it will just add to the image. So this is really useful if you have an image that's too small and you just need extra information. It'll go and generate that information. You just have to describe what's in the photo. And if you give it enough, you can see it's just created a whole nother world here.
Yeah, and that I can imagine would be extremely useful in something like Photoshop, for example. I mean, I could see how extending images, that could be a perfect addition. I mean, in my own work, actually, I can immediately see a number of different applications that would come in handy there. And it would actually, in fact, it would save me so much time having to, artificially recreate those myself.
And so this capability already is in Photoshop through these plugins. With the stability plugin, you can use DALL-E to extend the image.
Oh, right. Okay.
And Flying Dog also has that capability. And I'll go ahead and show you, for example, Flying Dog base is a 512 by 512. I think I can probably get it to do larger. Yeah, we'll do 1024. So we'll go blink. Let's just grab this area here. And we'll just tell it to. And I'm not sure if this is going to work, so we might have to just cut this part out because it's been a little problematic lately. But you can see I'm typing in epic photograph of a Norwegian fjord. We can add more details here to the information that we wanted to do. I'm going to have it give me maybe 4 steps, and let's see if it works. So I'm taking this into Photoshop and using the Flying Dog plugin here to generate some more aspects to our image. I've added the prompt, epic photograph of a Norwegian fjord, and hopefully this will work this time. We'll see if it comes up and it gets the information. You can tell it's processing right here. And yeah, it's going to add sections to our fjord. You can see sometimes it's adding watermarks and signatures already, but you know what? This is pretty cool. Let's grab that right there. And now you can see, here's our image now, as we've expanded the image quite a bit. And it looks great. We could just keep going. We could add more to it, but you can see how easy that was. So this is the Flying Dog plugin from the company called Flying Dog. Not every aspect is available in each of these plugins, and you're going to have to kind of learn how they work. And we can talk about that too down the road if we're interested.
Sure, and of course, if you're interested in those plugins, then we'll put the links to that in the description as well.
So the current processes for artificial intelligence image generation are shown here. Let's see if I can get this to populate. So text to image. So this is sort of a vocabulary for folks. Text to image means you're taking a text prompt, you're typing in the text, and you're creating an image from that text prompt. Image to image. This is taking an existing image, and then you're adding text to the image to give it a different look. So we're going to change the style of that image by adding the image, telling it what we want to see changed, and then it will do that for us. In painting, which is sort of a content-aware fix on steroids. Rather than just fixing an image, you can actually add image objects or images into it. For example, if you have a pirate, you want to add a parrot on his shoulder, you can do that. And then outpainting, which is what I just showed in Photoshop and in DALL-E, is where you take an existing image and you can expand the border. So it's sort of a content-aware fill or a content-aware addition. Again, on steroids, it's a much more advanced version of that. So those are sort of the 4 different processes that are involved right now. There are more coming as we talk, as we discuss this. There are more advances coming out as we speak. So what text to image is you're just taking a text prompt and you're creating an image with it. For example, this is an image from Midjourney, and the text prompt was high resolution, cyberpunk woman, portrait, neon, lighting, depth of field. And you can see it created this pretty wild image here. I can add some details to it. For example, here I've added by Albert Bierstadt. So I'm asking for a painting done by this specific artist. And you can see it's created a completely different, but yet fantastic image. And now here's a painting of a high resolution cyberpunk woman portrait, etc., by Titian. And you can see we have a completely different, very stylistic, almost a sort of a painted image with so abstract lighting to it. It's got a nice feel to it.
It's incredible how realistic those look.
Yeah, you can get just amazing stuff out of this. And this is Mid-Journey. Let's get ahead. So each of the three products, Mid-Journey, Dolly, and Stable Diffusion, produce different results. For example, here's a chimpanzee wearing a spacesuit. Here's this cyberpunk woman again with three different versions. And then this is another world very close to ours that we do not perceive directly, but they interact sometimes, painting by Thomas Cole. So you can see you can create sort of abstract concepts within this, and it will generate these images for you.
I can already hear the discussions in like Camera Club, photo competition guidelines and rules. I think.
Yeah, in fact, there was an image recently that was selected as I think it was in the Denver, one of the state fairs, and they selected an AI created image as their blue ribbon winner. And there was a lot of anger about this because it wasn't a photograph, it wasn't a painting, it was an AI image. And I think there's some validity to being unhappy that an AI image won that at this point, because it's just literally typing in and coming up with something. And so you're less of an artist, is more poetic and creating text prompts than you are actually doing anything to the image itself. So I think there's power in using those images for something else.
Do you remember not too many years ago there was an image that won? I want to say it was a Sony photographic like competition or something. It was an image that basically it showed a bit of sky shot through like an internal staircase, I think, and at the top of it was a plane, and it turns out the plane, which was perfectly positioned in the center of the image, had actually been photoshopped in, and there was this big hoo-ha about whether the award should be taken back or not. And all of that, I mean, it seems like incredible child's play now in comparison to what's possible today. Do you think that we're sort of on the brink of something that's it feels very much like when film photography gave way to digital, and there was this this massive break in how we take pictures and what we can do with them afterwards, and in the way that we can manipulate them and all that sort of stuff. It seems to, I mean, to me, it feels almost like we're at another sort of breaking point like that.
Yeah, I especially think the speed at which things are moving too, I think is an interesting thing. From film to digital took several years. It took almost a decade to go from direct film to usable digital. I remember I was working at a company in the early '90s that we got a digital camera, and its quality was like 320 by 320. And I mean, it's nice, but you're not going to print this. You're not going to use it for anything.
1.1 megapixels.
And then we went. Yeah, exactly. And then we jumped to 640 by 640. Wow, that's twice a jump, but that took like 2 years. Well, with AI, we've gone from interesting artistic images to photorealistic images in like 60 days. So I think we're going to see an exponential advancement, a continual exponential advancement in this technology over the next couple of years. I think we are going to be to a point where, right now, if you generate a picture of a person in Mid-Journey or in Dolly, it's going to look good, but you're going to see details like they're going to have 8 fingers. They're going to have hands that are all squished together. That's one of the big jokes is that, oh yeah, it's going to take over our jobs, but it shows all these hands and they show.
I did experience that because I had a little play with that earlier myself. As I was prepping for this episode, and that's what I noticed. It was some very deformed hands there.
Yeah, it's still not quite there, but I think as time progresses, you can tell they'll be able to identify those issues within the AI and tell it, hey, human beings only have 5 hands or 5 fingers now, hide 5 hands. human beings only have 5 fingers, and it'll be able to generate exactly 5 fingers per hand. And I don't think we're too far from that. I think a lot of the naysayers are going, there's no use for this. I think there's going to be a lot of use for this, and I don't think it's going to take the jobs of photographers. I think it's going to make our jobs uh, more interesting, especially for composite artists and for those of us who are into that already. I think you're going to see more compositing tools sort of filtered into, say, Lightroom. So there's a lot of folks who just use Lightroom. And we already see AI being used, especially in the newest edition of Lightroom, where it's doing the sort of content-aware masking, which is pretty amazing. I don't know if anybody's seen this already. If you go into a photograph of a human being and you tell it that you want to do an advanced portrait in Lightroom, it creates all masks. It creates teeth masks, eye masks, pupil masks on the fly. And so it's already starting to filter in.
Yeah.
And I think as time progresses, we're going to see even more things filter into, say, Lightroom and into Photoshop.
Yeah, it's just talking about the face or person recognition and so face or body detail recognition in the latest Lightroom version. I just I recently shot a like a family portrait session, and I have to say I took that as an opportunity to just see if I could use that in editing and speed up the process, and I can't tell you how much time I saved. Not having to mask things out individually, but and it was so good. I mean, it was so good. I just couldn't believe it. It was incredible. It saved me, I would say. I mean, I probably retouched about 30 shots, which if you have to individually retouch them, 30 family shots with multiple people in the image, that's going to take you a decent chunk of time, to do that. I did the whole thing in probably an hour flat. And that's, that was just incredible. And then I could go back and watch Netflix. It was perfect.
I can remember several years ago at an Adobe conference, we were watching the keynote, and they were showing us, it might have been sneaks, and they were showing us content-aware fill. And it was the first time they had shown this and demonstrated it for the public. And all of us photographers there were just blown away that we could, remove objects and people and things from a photo in an instant. And we're all kind of whispering to one another, our jobs are, this is the end of our jobs. People are going to be able to do this themselves. Well, not really. And content art fill is good, but it's not perfect. And then, years later, we got, the object selection tool. We're all sitting in there watching this object selection tool, and you just click a button and the object selected. We're like, oh, this is the end of our jobs. Well, if anybody's used the object selection tool, it's good. It's quite good. It's not perfect. And if you're doing a real fine-tuned composite, you're going to want to get in there and clean that up yourself. In fact, I find quite often the object selection tool is more of a hindrance, because what it does is it ends up going to be jaggy lines on the person, and I really don't want that.
I mean, one of the things about Photoshop in particular is that there are so many different methods of removing just about anything, and it really depends on the situation and the scenario as to which of those methods actually works best. Or very often it's a combination of those methods that will give you the perfect end results. And I mean, that's true for just object removal, but that's equally true for, retouching particular aspects of the face, for example, or the skin, bags under the eyes. There's about 50 different methods as to how you can do each one of those tasks, but it just really depends on the image and the situation and the desired end result. That's ultimately the other thing that you, as a retoucher, you have to think about: what is the end result supposed to be? What's the purpose? Is it going to be, a billboard, or is it going to be, a 90 by 90 pixel email signature image? And that will very much determine what method and at what speed, you basically go through the retouching. That's, but Adobe's latest tools, both in Lightroom and in Photoshop, I have to say, they help me as a photographer to speed up the process, and it means that I can get through that retouching work quicker, and it purely from a business perspective, it simply means I can then focus on my business, actually, for example, and do other things.
Or for me, in my day-to-day job, my 9-to-5 job, I do graphic design for a sleep products retailer here in California. So we sell mattresses and furniture and that sort of thing. And one of the things I've had a real issue with is finding stock images that are exactly what I want to show. Uh, for example, a lot of stock images will show a nice bedroom, but then there's, some outdated furniture in the picture, or there's an animal or a person on the bed, and I might not necessarily want to show that. So what I've started doing is I've actually started going into Midjourney and Dall-E and generating bedroom images with just a bed in the image, or just a certain aspect. And the great thing is that I can change the lighting. If I don't like that image and I want different lighting on the image, I can just tell it, hey, change this lighting, use a slightly different lighting. I can use the same image and change it. It's an amazing tool. And so I see this for photographers and for artists, compositors, as becoming a very useful tool in the toolbox, like content aware fill or like, object selection tools, less than a something that's going to ruin our lives. And I think that's sort of the way to look at it.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I mean, content aware fill is actually a really good example. I mean, I use that literally on a daily basis. And I remember actually not too long ago, I came across, it was probably one of the early Flern videos or something on YouTube, where, which was all about like, object removal and how to like remove objects in the background and then repaint a photorealistic, I don't know, street curb or something like that. And the amount of work that had to go into that and the amount of time that it took to do that was just incredible. Whilst now I just go, oh yeah, just select a thing, content aware fill, bye. And you're like, it's it's a tool. Why would you want to use that tool?
Yeah, and I see AI, especially this latest generation, and I see when Adobe starts to incorporate this into sort of content aware fill, I think it's going to be even more powerful because it takes a look at what's going on around it, and rather than just repeating patterns that already exist on your photo, it's going to create patterns that don't exist on your photo or that mesh together with your photo perfectly. And I think that's going to blow us away, and it's going to give us more power in updating things. I mean, we can already select a background and tell it to blur the background, and it looks okay. It's not quite, doesn't really quite get that sort of depth of field that we're after. It looks pretty good. Well, with generative tools now, you can tell it to create the same image, but with the depth of field, and it will do that for you, and it will probably nail the depth of field better than you could have done with any other tool within Photoshop. So I see that this tool is coming, and it's here to some extent, and it's good. It's a good thing, and it's not something to be feared as much as it is something to be learned about. And I'm hoping that as time progresses, Adobe and these other companies will make it much more accessible. Because right now it's still a sort of techie, and you have to be a bit of a geek to get these things installed and running on your system. Yeah.
That's because Adobe is not the only company that really heavily sort of going in, getting into AI. Skylum is another thing that's really impressed me. I had a bit of a play with Skylum Neo at the photography show, and one of the things I really like there, and although I'm not a wedding photographer, but I can see how this is a super useful tool. It's this thing whereby you basically load several thousands of your images into the AI. It analyzes your editing style, and then it basically reimagines your editing style and and edits your latest, I don't know, wedding that you've shot, in your style, or in fact in the style of just about any other photographer that you want to edit in, because that's another thing you do. And it takes into account your color grading, the way you prefer to crop, all that kind of stuff, the things that you typically focus on, and it literally, edits your photos for you in absolutely no time at all. And if anybody who's ever shot a wedding, you're looking at thousands of images that you know how much time that takes. And then I'm not saying it's necessarily the end result is necessarily 100% perfect, but it saves you so much time because all you got to do is go through those images and then make some final adjustments here and there, and and it saves you so much time. We've been doing this actually, for a decade or something with presets in Lightroom, for example. I do that all the time. I create for a particular, let's take a particular event shoot, for example. I've got, let's say, 800 images to get through. First of all, I create a particular look that I generally want to achieve across the board with the event that I've shot. And that then acts as a basis, but it has all the base manipulations baked in already. So I don't have to constantly, I don't know, roll back the reds, and you do that on every image. It basically is essentially has created all of those settings already. And it just saves me a ton of time when I then go through each image, because then I really just have to do some very basic things like adjust the exposure, change a couple of things, and then I'm on to the next image. So, we've been using those techniques in a sense forever already. This is just the next step.
Indeed. And with artificial intelligence, taking that even to another level, there's a new product available called Dream Booth, which is still sort of at a more technical level. But you're able to take all of your photos, pump them into the system now, Stable Diffusion, and output images based upon your style. One of the folks who I was following in one of the forums he actually works for, I think he works for the company called Rivian, which is a new automotive manufacturer. They make these really interesting electrical vehicles. And I'm going to share my screen here to show you what he did. He created images based upon the products that his company uses. And these are all AI generated images that he created from that data set that he gave to the system. So these aren't photos. Nobody went out to the woods and actually took those, or to the beach and took these photos. He generated these. And, they're not quite perfect yet, but you can see the direction this is headed. And that is kind of scary. I think, not having to hire a photographer and get them on set. I think there is some fear there. But I think there's a lot of potential as well to save time. If one of the things I've been doing in my artwork, as I was telling you, is I was using some stock photos that they weren't quite perfect. I was having to edit them. And so rather than edit photos, I just went into, so these images were generated by Midjourney, and they're pretty good. Now, the great thing is, in Instagram, at an Instagram resolution, you're not going to be able to notice that if you zoom in here, nothing that's actually on this table makes sense. None of this actually is anything you'd actually have anywhere in it. And, so there's what's going on with this window, right? But at a quick glance on Instagram or, on social media, if I'm just showing you this much of the image, it's going to work fine. It looks good enough at a distance. So that's one of the other cool things I could do with this is that, if I need specific images, I can go in and at least try to get them out of the AI and then edit them even further if necessary.
Fantastic. So where's this going to take us in the future, though? That's what I want to know.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. I actually have a bit of data on that, and I can show you some of this. And this is actually still 2 months old, and that may not sound like a lot, but in reality, 2 months in this space is forever. What's next? Yeah, what's next? Where is this going? Video. So right now, you're able to take a frame from an artificially generated image and basically morph it to another one, and then morph it to another one, and morph it to another one. As you can see, we can create these pretty artistic images and videos that morph from image to image. We can now take images from these artificial intelligence and then rotoscope them using a product called EBSENT. And so we can take an actual video, and then we can actually take something and rotoscope an image on top of it. So in this case, we rotoscoped a alabaster, or a painting, or in the last case here, he's created a zombie.
We're seeing a lot of that at the moment in the form of deep fakes.
Yes. And so this is going to get even more intense, because we won't necessarily have to deep fake someone that already exists. We'll be able to deep fake someone who doesn't exist and create a completely new actor. The next step, of course, is going to be 3-dimensionals. Well, if you can generate a single dimension of one of these images, there's no reason you can't create all 3 sides of the image, and then even generate an output of a 3-dimensional file. So I think the technology is there to do a whole lot more already. Stable Diffusion 1.5 was just released. It's got mixed reviews, although I think there's a lot of good information there. The in-painting model is much better, which means you can select a portion of the image and add to it really easily. The company Stability AI and Runway, which was another company that worked together, there was some drama between them, but that's all gotten worked out. As I mentioned before, there's several different ways to access these data sets and these applications. There's the web version that you can access, which is pretty straightforward, and everybody can probably access DALL-E or Midjourney or Stability UI through the web or through Discord. Or if you're interested, you can actually get the plugins for Photoshop for Stability AI and for DALL-E, either through Christian Cantrell or Flying Dog, both of which are available on the Adobe Exchange. The last way to actually do this is to go to Stable Diffusion or Google Stable Diffusion GitHub, and you can download one of the many. There's a lot of different models of Stable Diffusion that you can download, install on your own personal computer, and run locally. Now, it requires a bit of geekiness and a little bit of programming language, and so that's kind of outside the scope of a lot of folks. But you can generate very quickly images, and it won't cost you anything because you're doing it on your own personal computer. So that's one of the big advantages to being able to install this locally, is that it's not going to cost you anything. Just about every other interface that you encounter will cost you something. Midjourney requires at least a $10 a month purchase for more than a few images per month. DALL-E also requires credit purchase. So there's going to be some money involved with these. If you download one of the open source Stable Diffusion GitHub versions, install it on your computer, you can then integrate that into the Flying Dog application on your own PC and run it through Photoshop constantly, generating as many images as you want all day long. The one caveat to that kind of installation is that she's going to require you to have currently an NVIDIA RTX 2060 or better video card. And currently it only works on NVIDIA video cards. And so I would recommend that you have at least 8 gigs of video RAM. And the more RAM, the better, because the more RAM you have, the bigger image you can create. And the better video card you have, the faster it'll create. So those are sort of your two caveats. Now, they do have Stable Diffusion that will run on M1 and M2 Macintoshes. So you have to go and Google for that specific instance, and you can download that and run that locally. It is fairly slow right now compared to video card, but that's getting better every day. And there are things that we can do to optimize that down the road. So if you're a Macintosh owner, which most photographers I know are, you're going to want to look into either the web-based applications, or you're going to want to download the M1 or M2 specific. If you have an older Mac, you're out of luck. You're going to have to use the web-based application or the Discord-based app. That said, they still provide a very interactive and easy to use experience compared to sort of the local install.
I'm guessing my 2011 MacBook Pro isn't going to cut it.
Not going to cut it. In fact, you're probably going to grind that thing to a halt just trying.
Yeah, well, I think I'm grinding this to a halt just using Zoom these days.
Yeah, my computer, I'm a Windows user,
right,
and I have a fairly powerful photographic computer with a lot of RAM and a pretty massive video card, and I cannot do Stable Diffusion on it. So I've actually had to buy a laptop, and then we're actually running the Zoom on my laptop because it actually has a 3050 with 4 gigs of video RAM, so it's just enough to run it. I could produce one image at a time and at 512 by 512, but I can still do it, so it's pretty useful. So there's one other application that I think folks should know about, and I mentioned it before, and it's called NVIDIA Gauguin 2, and it's a website that folks can go to, and it's also an application for Windows, and I'll show you the Windows application because I think it's pretty phenomenal at what it can do. And this is an example of what's called image-to-image artificial intelligence, and you can see my screen okay now? So it kind of works like Photoshop. We have layers and we have a palette of panel here. So we can actually select, let's go ahead and create, this is what I always do. When I go and I create an ocean, I'm going to grab this little tool right here, which is a line tool, and I'm going to create an ocean right here. And then we'll go ahead and fill the ocean. And look, we already have an ocean filled here. Oh, you know what? This really needs rocks. We really need some rocks. Let's go add some rocks in our ocean. So I'm going to go to another layer. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Those variations. I actually wanted the brush size, which is over here. I'm going to add a layer. And on this new layer, I'm going to add some rocks. And I'm going to paint right here on the image. And we could leave that arch rock there. That's kind of cool, huh? Or let's go ahead and fill it and see what we get. So this looks like suddenly we're on the California coast. We can add a layer and we can add some sand along this beach here. And we can even go in here and we can add like a little pathway here. And if we wanted, we could put, you know, let's little puppy clouds. And as Bob Ross might say, how about a little happy tree right here? So you can see just right there, this is image to image. I have a very simple image over here that I've created. And with that simple image, I can create this, and then I can just add variations to it. Almost infinite. I can even upload my own photos as I've done here and add variations to those.
Yeah, phenomenal.
That's pretty substantial. That's phenomenal. I like that. Yeah, that's a pretty good image right there. So these are 1024 by 1024. And this is still technically a beta, even though it's been out for about 2 years now.
Okay.
But, you know, as far as AI goes, I just find this so compelling. It's just so much fun to draw on the screen and have it immediately create things. And so you can create wild stuff out of this, like as I was showing you earlier with, keep going, create a hole right in the middle of our...
Yeah, and it's instant.
It's instantaneous, yeah. So this is running on Windows. This is a Windows application, but for Mac users and for folks who don't have enough VRAM, you can go and run this on the web. Just look for Galgan 2, and it'll run just fine on the web. And it's got some of the same interface. I don't think it's got the layers, but it works just the same, and it's quite phenomenal. It's a lot of fun to play with. There's a 360 version, which allows you to make 360 panorama images. And then I also read that they're creating a new version, which will actually incorporate objects and other things into the system, and it's going to be even better and better. So NVIDIA is working hard on this, and they're really at the forefront. I actually got to talk to the AMD company at the Adobe Max, so I kind of showed them some of the stuff I was doing with the NVIDIA cards and going, hey guys, you got to step up here. And they said that they are working on similar products down in the future, and we probably will start seeing some connection there soon.
You know, whenever something happens in stills photography, I think the next step, this comes with sort of, you know, an advance in computing power and so on and so forth, is, you know, we see things like that in the moving image, you know, in video, for example. That'll be, I think that'll be the next step in that, because I mean we already used to CGI and computer generated imagery in movies, for example, but this technology will make that a hell of a lot easier to do.
Yeah, I can see folks uploading their own styles and images and characters into one of the engines, and then having it generate three-dimensional or having it generate animations of that person doing things. And we're already seeing this. If you go on Twitter and you search for some of these animations, you'll start to see them. They're getting better and better and better every day. And as those image sets increase, and as that data gets better, you're just going to see a refinement of that product. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe somebody can make Princess Leia look more photorealistic than...
Like Princess Leia?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. My wife and I, we've been watching the Andor series, and she didn't remember Rogue One.
Right.
So we started up Rogue One, and we got to that point, and she's like, you know, that kind of looks like her. I'm like, yeah, kind of, but we could actually make it. No, there was a fellow on YouTube who was doing deep fakes, and he was doing really nice image sets with the deep fakes. But I think with AI now, he would be even better. So
yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Because Rogue One came out in 2016, 2017, something like that. So the technology has, like, you know, it has come on in leaps and bounds since then. You know,
Yeah, I still remember we were watching it last night. Grand Moff Tarkin is very computer looking, very plasticky. I think it was pretty amazing at first on the screen, but I think now that we've had time to see what else can be done, and still looks very plasticky. I would love to see that redone, just that section. And knowing Lucas, that'll probably happen, but
yeah,
we'll see.
yeah, yeah. I've been really into the Andor series. So it's a bit of a slow start on that series, and then it really kicked off actually.
Yeah, we were watching it, and I really enjoyed it because I love I'm a big fan of British murder mysteries, and especially the old episodic ones where you add an entire mystery in a single episode rather than you got to watch 8 episodes to get the mystery over with. And I don't mind that, but I kind of like the older ones. So for me, watching Andor is kind of like, oh, I know where this is going. This is great. I love this. And my wife's going, I'm bored. I don't want to watch any more of this. So I said, stick with it. We got to the third and fourth episode, and now we're hooked.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's just exactly the same happened to me. My wife actually gave up probably about after the first episode. She was like, "Oh, I don't know." She's a massive sci-fi fan. I'm lucky enough that I've married a woman who, whenever it's like, "Hey, do you want to watch a movie?" She goes like, "Does it have spaceships in it?" Yes. Okay.
I did.
Awesome. Great. But yeah, Andor, she's a massive Star Wars and Star Trek fan, but and like she's a bit like, oh, I'm not sure, it's a bit slow. And then I kept watching, sort of 3 episodes in, I said to her like, this is really kicking off. Like you gotta love it.
I like simply the fact that like Rogue One, it's a very serious series. There's not a lot of Ewok sort of funniness in it. It's intended for an adult viewer who's able to follow a long, difficult storyline. And we don't see a lot of famous people in it, even though we're hearing a lot. And by famous, I mean we don't have any of the original Star Wars folks, except for Mon Mothma and a couple of the others mentioned in there. And I just kind of love it. I also love the fact that in this, the Empire is not the comical, um, at least in the newest movies, the Empire or the Empire, the new Empire, whatever it is, the first order or whatever. They're comedians. I mean, they're emo comedians, but they're terrible. I mean, it's like a Mitchell Webb skit, where we the baddies. I mean, that's how bad they are, Um, but in this, it's like, yes, there's this huge bureaucracy, and it's an evil bureaucracy, but they think they're doing good, and I really enjoy that. I think it's extremely well written and well done. Yeah. Have you had a chance to see the series the Expanse?
Yes. So I think I'm one season behind, but yeah, we really got into the Expanse as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have decided that it is my favorite sci-fi series of all time, and I'm a big sci-fi fan, so I know a lot of people who hate, they saw that first season and just they were turned off. But for me, there's a scene in that first season where they've just passed an SOS beacon, and the guy decides he decides that he's going to turn the ship around and go back, and it's going to take him 3 days to get there. And I'm like, awesome, that makes complete sense. And my wife's like, why can't they just zoom there like Star Trek? And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
in real
exactly.
space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, The Expanse is really cool. My wife actually, incidentally, is a massive fan of The Expanse as well. So yeah, we enjoyed that. There's been a few series lately that we've really gotten into, because this is a very much a sci-fi household.
Yeah, it's good and bad. I feel like there's good stuff like The Expanse and Andor, and then I feel that there's other stuff that where IP is getting, intellectual property is getting taken, and they're flipping it and they're turning it into something else. And I'm not necessarily happy with that. I'm not really happy with what's going on with Rings of Power. I'm really not happy with the Wheel of Time series. But I'm old school. I read the books, so I kind of want to see my favorite stuff turned into movies rather than someone else's vision for that book. So
yeah, Rings of Power.
It's a different taste.
Yeah, Rings of Power was I was sort of, I don't know, I was kind of on the fence with it. I thought especially the first episode was cringeworthy. It's like, I almost refused to watch any further. It's my wife that kind of convinced me to carry on watching. It did get better. I thought, once you get over the, like, wow, why is everything so politically correct in here? What's going on? Like, this is too much, yeah, but what I think once you get past that, then and you get into the story, then it actually does get better. There's a funny thing that happens here. But whenever we watch TV here, my wife went to film school, and her thing is script writing. So she comes from the the dialogue and the script kind of, that's her angle. And I'm a very visual person, so I look at the color grading and the the special effects and the rendering and the way stuff's lit, and it's always the same thing. It's always like me going like, wow, look at that, that's freaking awesome. Look at how the backlighting is incredible. And she goes like, yeah, but the dialogue's shit. Like, oh God.
Yeah, my wife and I got to do that as well. I especially find, like the last Star Wars film. I mean, the three of the newest Star Wars films I thought were cinematically they were really well done. I thought they were beautiful, but I hate them with a fervor. The script was terrible. The storyline was ridiculous, and it was it's one of those things where I was like, oh, let's watch this again, and I'm like, yeah, I can't bring myself to do it. It's just too much of a betrayal.
Yeah, the storylines are really jumbled in this. That's the problem with it. It just doesn't make a lot of coherent sense. In the original trilogy, there was a sense of discovery all the way through. You sort of discovered the universe in a way. The problem with the latest trilogy was that the universe already exists, because unlike the prequels, which in my view looked terrible, because the CGI just really wasn't. I mean, it was great at the time, but when you look, I mean, they're like, how old? 25 years old now, 20 years old, something like that.
Yeah,
give or take.
Yeah.
So the problem with the latest trilogy is just simply that on one hand, they've gone back to that rough and ready time in that universe where everything's a bit broken, everything's a bit ramshackle, everything's a bit dirty, which I love. I love that about the original trilogy. The fact that the spaceships weren't clean, but they were like all messed up, and that was my main criticism with the prequels. It's like, this isn't Star Wars, but everything's new. What the hell's going on? This isn't cool. But the problem is that we already know that universe because of the original trilogy, and now we're back in there. So it's not a matter of discovering that universe anymore. Now it's a matter of storyline, and it was so important to have a really coherent storyline. And the problem with that is because you've got this ensemble cast of multiple characters, you have to basically track these different story arches that need to make sense in the way that they intersect, and that was a problem from a writing perspective. And that the fact that they just dropped in old characters like Han Solo and they kill him off like a few scenes later, it just seems like, well, why was he in there? It doesn't make any sense. And that happened.
He was just there because that's who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just because like, oh yeah, we just get some fans of the original trilogy on board with this, and it was like, okay, no, that's kind of where
I think that's one of the reasons. I think that's one of the reasons Mandalorian and Rogue One and Andor have worked so well, is because we're exploring a universe we already know, but we're seeing aspects of it that we haven't known, and we're not necessarily having a time. We're not beholden to. We've got to show this cast person this time, and we've got to have this robot say something funny at this time. Instead, this is how it would be if this actually happened. And I think Mandalorian went a little overboard with the cuteness of Grogu, but hey, who doesn't love a tiny little Yoda? He's great. And then, yeah, exactly, right, there he is. I love it. And then with Andor, we're seeing. I mean, for me. Andor, I'm almost liking Andor more than Mandalorian now, simply because I feel like Andor feels like that could have really happened. That feels real to me.
So what's really clever about this is, and this is the thing I love, when I first heard that they're making Rogue One, when I first, like about 2 years before it actually came out, there was the first news that they were gonna take that part of the storyline and they're gonna expand on that, and I thought, that's genius, because that is the thing, what the rebels. I mean, it's just a throwaway comment. Some rebels have managed to get hold of the plans for the Death Star, It's a throwaway thing. You take
Right.
it for granted, and then in the original trilogy, the storyline progresses. To take that bit and turn that into an expansion of the universe makes perfect sense. It's a stroke of
Right.
genius, but it makes perfect sense, and it's a perfect angle. That's why, when Rogue One came out, and it was, we were back in the dirty part of the universe, but it was an expansion of it, and virtually none of with the exception of Darth Vader at the very end, you know, none of the characters were known in any way. But that's where you really rediscovered a side of Star
Right.
Wars that you didn't know, but it just worked perfectly.
Yeah, and I think even, and if we go back, we talk about some of the politically correct stuff. Even Rogue One, not Rogue One so much. Andor has a clear political message, which is that fascist governments are overbearing and inefficient, and eventually fail under their own weight. And you're seeing that, and I think they're doing a great job of telling us this and showing us this without having to tell us out front and beat us over the head with it, which I feel is sort of the modern way of doing filmography, script writing. Is we have to shove this political viewpoint in there, and then we have to make it clear that it's the political viewpoint, and then we got to make sure everybody knows and reinforce the viewpoint. And it's like, guys, we got it the first time. It's okay. And I talk with my wife about this. I say, it's okay if you want to bring this point in organically through the story. But as soon as you have to sort of break out from the story and then give me a sermonette on your political point, you've lost me.
Yeah,
Because you've broken the story.
The latest season of Stranger Things. That's all I'm saying. Oh my God, like that was never ending. That point. Okay.
Yeah, same thing. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and there was one I got about 20, maybe a half an hour into, and then the reader, the author breaks out of the story, has one of the characters basically lecture me on a very 21st century viewpoint. And I'm like, it would have been fine if you had just kind of mentioned it and organically said, these people are together for this reason. Right? I'm happy with that. But the fact that you had to have a character lecture me on your political viewpoint from this is a medieval story, and this is a very 21st century viewpoint. It doesn't, it's fine to have, but yeah, you don't have to beat me over the head with
it.
Yeah.
Have you seen The Umbrella Academy?
Yes.
It was exactly the same thing in the latest season, the last season, where like one of the characters, switched from, being a female character to being a male character. Okay. There was a bit of exposition in the first episode that explained that a little bit.
Enough said.
Yeah. But then it just went on and on and on and on. And like literally every other scene, we were back there. And it's like, and like in episode 4 or something, I turned around and said to my wife, like, when is this going to stop? I mean, I get it. Okay. But I don't care. I don't care enough about it.
Okay.
I don't have to have that ramped down my throat all the time. I mean, that's just way over the top.
I'm just not, I'm not. Yeah, I guess I'm one of those grumpy old guys, and it's get off my lawn. But I really feel like if I kind of feel the same way with The Witcher to some extent. I love The Witcher. I love the IP. The first couple seasons were rough, but I enjoyed them. But I see the direction that they're heading, and this isn't even necessarily political as much as it is just script writing. And it's like the books went this way, we're going to go over here, and I'm okay with that to an extent because The Witcher has a deep sort of a background. They've got the games, they have the stories, there's a lot of fan relationship to it. The games sort of expand the universe. So it's okay. But then you've broken the storyline in such a way that I can't imagine how you're going to fulfill the end goal of the books from this. And in the same way I feel with the Wheel of Time. You've broken the story in such a way that I don't really see how that end goal of the storyline is going to get fulfilled by the direction you're headed, without firmly breaking what you created. So it's a different way of doing things. Yeah, I mean, for me, that artificial intelligence is really sort of a connection into, the things that I love, the sci-fi, and I get to create worlds that don't exist. My Twitter profile pic is now a monkey in space, a chimpanzee in space that I created all through AI, and I took them into Photoshop and edited them and expanded it. So there's a lot of neat things you can do with this that I think that intersect a lot of the photography and filmography worlds and cinematography worlds, and I see that just increasing as time progresses. And as we were talking about, I definitely see this becoming a major tool in cinematography.
I mean, it certainly, it has this sort of, it just reminds me of the holodeck in Star Trek Next Generation. Do you remember when it first came out? I was a kid when it first came out, but the whole idea of like, having a holodeck and being able to transport yourself into any reality you wanted, that was at the click of a button, basically, and just telling the computer what to do. That's really something. I always thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if that would come reality? And in a weird way with AI, that is sort of starting to happen in a weird way, because you can see this like expanding. Going, like we said, it's going from editing still images to videos. Before you know it, it's going to be virtual reality and whatever else happening next. So I can imagine that in the not too distant future, you can find yourself wearing some VR glasses, goggles. You find yourself in a totally photorealistic world.
Yeah, and there already are VR plugins coming for Stable Diffusion, and so people are able to create objects and stuff within the VR world through Stable Diffusion. So we're getting very close to that. And it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a application on Steam that you can get for your PC, and you can actually walk around the bridge of the Enterprise and through the entire ship, and there's portions of the ship. And what's really funny is that a section of the ship, as you walk into it, there's a break in the wall. It's actually broken, and you look in there and you're looking into the you're actually in, so you're in the holodeck. So it's like you're on a holodeck, in a holodeck, looking at a holodeck. So I thought that was a pretty cool reference, and I can see that the AI is going to take over some of a lot of that potential there.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting time. Scary, but exciting.
Yeah, it's, as I say, the robot overlords are certainly taking over. Micah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. It was incredibly interesting, and and I've certainly learned a lot about artificial intelligence. 100%. I'm sure our listeners and viewers are going to be as fascinated as they are probably scared by now. But it was amazing having you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on and talk to us.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on. If folks are more interested in this, I have a YouTube video that was made back in October. It kind of covers a lot of the same material. It'll go in depth on a lot of things. It'll really explain where to get some of these products and test them out, what the limitations are for October. That's going to be changing. I'll try and keep that updated as time progresses. I have a feeling that I'll probably have to release a new one in just a few weeks, because things are moving so quickly.
Absolutely. Excellent. So this is the end of episode 130 of the CameraShake podcast. And again, if you are listening to the audio version, especially, but with all of our episodes, but especially with this one, make sure you head over to YouTube, youtube.com/CameraShake, where you can certainly, watch all these amazing AI generated images as they appear on the screen. Other than that, make sure you get in touch. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, all of the social media platforms. We're everywhere. Anyway, get in touch. It'd be super awesome to hear from you. Micah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you again next Thursday.